Okay. How important is personal sadness or internal conflict to creativity?
I probably don't think of either of them in those terms, but they're probably another. You said about living through the war. I thought you were going to say that our generation's war was AIDS. Was living through, which we still do, but maybe not in such a totally tragic way, in terms of Britain anyway. And, when Chris and I became famous, this is also mentioned in one of the commentaries to the songs in the book, my best friend, who was in Dust, it's called Chris Dowell, came back from Sri Lanka where he was teaching, and he had a very bad cold and all the rest of it. And Chris and I were doing promotion for Suburbia, and he suddenly phoned up, and his partner phoned me up and said he'd been taken to a hospital. And you suddenly realized, in those days, HIV was regarded as the beginning of AIDS, and that he had AIDS. And so for all of those years of Left to My Own Devices and It's a Sin and making records with Dusty and stuff, I was in St. Mary's Hospital, Paddington, visiting this very close friend of mine who was just dying gradually, and there were good days and bad days. And it was impossible for that not to go in the songs. But I remember when we wrote It Couldn't Happen Here, that was about, It Couldn't Happen Here was referring to AIDS, and the fact, this is in the book as well, that me and Chris Dowell, Christopher Dowell, had a conversation where he was saying that he'd read out it wasn't going to happen in Britain like it did in the United States. And then, of course, it did. And so it really informed everything I wrote, or a lot of what I wrote. But It Couldn't Happen Here is a very oblique lyric, because I wrote it and I didn't really want Chris Dowell to know what it was about, in case he was upset by it. So it's a very sort of poetic lyric and rather oblique, because I didn't want to say it in an obvious way. And that, went on, as you know, through Your Funny Uncle and Being Boring. And it goes on to The Survivors, which I think comes out in 1996. And after that, I didn't know anyone else who died of AIDS. But during that, the first 10 years of the Pet Shop Boys, I knew, a lot of people who disappeared because of this. And so that had a profound effect.